What's this?
Well, I mean, you could argue that any group of people, like a company, is essentially a cybernetic collective of people and machines. That's what a company is. And then there's different levels of complexity in the way these companies are formed. And then there's this sort of like a collective AI in the Google search, where we're all sort of plugged in as like nodes on the network, like leaves on a big tree. And we're all feeding this network without questions and answers. We're all collectively programming the AI, and Google plus all the humans that connect to it are one giant cybernetic collective. This is also true of Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all these social networks. They're giant cybernetic collectives. I made this comment some years ago, but it feels like we are the biological bootloader for AI, effectively. We are building it. And then we're building progressively greater intelligence. And the percentage of intelligence that is not human is increasing. And eventually, we will represent a very small percentage of intelligence. The merge scenario with AI is the one that seems like probably the best. Like if you can't beat it, join it. So from a long-term existential standpoint, that's like the purpose of Neuralink, is to create a high bandwidth interface to the brain such that we can be symbiotic with AI. Because we have a bandwidth problem. We just can't communicate through open fingers, it's too slow. I think best case scenario, we effectively merge with AI, where AI serves as a tertiary cognition layer. Then that could be a good outcome. That could be quite a positive outcome for the future. It will enable anyone who wants to have superhuman cognition.
You know, there's so many verses in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, talking about idolatry and people turning from the one true God and worshiping idols and making idols. And it's interesting that when you start to look through them all, how many of them actually specifically address this, the ongoing theme of how these idols are deaf, dumb, and mute and can't speak for themselves. Psalm 115, 4-8. Their idols are silver and gold, the work of human hands. They have mouths but do not speak, eyes but do not see. They have ears but do not hear, noses but do not smell. They have hands but do not feel, feet but do not walk. They do not make a sound in their throat. Those who make them become like them, so do all who trust in them. Isaiah 46, 6-10. Those who lavish gold from the purse and weigh out silver in the scales hire a goldsmith, and he makes it into a god. Then they fall down and worship. They lift it to their shoulders, they carry it. They set it in its place, and it stands there. It cannot move from its place. If one cries to it, it does not answer or save him from his trouble. Remember this and stand firm. Recall it to mind, you transgressors. Remember the former things of old, for I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times things not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish my purpose. Jeremiah 10. Hear the word that the Lord speaks to you, O house of Israel. Thus says the Lord, Learn not the way of the nations, nor be dismayed at the signs of the heavens, because the nations are dismayed at them. For the customs of the peoples are vanity. A tree from the forest is cut down and worked with an axe by the hands of a craftsman. They decorate it with silver and gold. They fasten it with hammer and nails so that it cannot move. Their idols are like scarecrows in a cucumber field, and they cannot speak. They have to be carried, for they cannot walk. Do not be afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, neither is it in them to do good. Psalm 115. Not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name give glory for the sake of your steadfast love and your faithfulness. Why should the nations say, where is their God? Our God is in the heavens, he does all that he pleases. Their idols are silver and gold, the work of human hands. They have mouths, but do not speak, eyes, but do not see. In Habakkuk, chapter 2, or Habakkuk, whichever. What profit is an idol when its maker has shaped it, a metal image, a teacher of lies? For its maker trusts in its own creation when he makes speechless idols. Woe to him who says to a wooden thing, awake, to a silent stone, arise. Can this teach? Behold, it is overlaid with gold and silver, and there is no breath at all in it. But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. So you get the idea. There's many more I could go through, but that's just a sampling. And so I've been thinking about this in light of some of the things said by Elon Musk in a recent interview on the Joe Rogan podcast, which I grabbed some clips from for that intro there, talking about the concept of the Cybernetic collective and how humans, in all kinds of ways, and all kinds of groups and networks and companies, and even all of those of us interacting on YouTube and watching videos and commenting and liking and disliking, we're all programming the AI. We're all feeding it data. And when we think about this in light of what it says in Revelation 13 about the image of the beast and how finally there will be an idol that actually can speak, that people actually can interact with, it, it can move in the sense that it's going to be integrated with everything around the world technologically, manufacturing and robots and self-driving cars and on, and then ultimately what Elon describes as the merge scenario, right? Thinking that this is really the best option that we have is to merge with it because it's inevitable. The singularity is an inevitability. And so the more you pay attention to this whole ongoing debate over AI and what are the existential risks and what do we do, this is what you hear again and again. The inevitability of it is what always boils down to the question of, what is this AI going to be like? Is it going to care about us? Is it going to be beneficial for us? Or is it going to be, the Terminator scenario? And I found some recent pertinent comments from a talk given by Nick Bostrom, who I've shown before. He's primarily known for his work on simulation theory. He's the director of the Future of Humanity Institute out of Oxford, and he usually talks mostly about simulation theory, but he's also here talking about AI, which of course is all interrelated, and this is what he had to say.
How would we ensure that something that is super intelligent would care about us?
Well, that is, one way to formulate this control problem. How it would care about us, care about what we want, do what we intended to do. Like, all of these are different ways of describing something that involves a big technical problem, the problem of value learning, or some other way of controlling what the super intelligence would do.
That means we would still control it, though, right? Or not?
Well, in some kind of way. I mean, it's like, imagine how could the chimpanzees or the ancestors, the last common ancestor, like, if you could imagine, okay, so they couldn't really sit around and talk, they didn't have language, but if you imagine them sitting around the campfire and thinking, oh, there's going to be these humans one day,
right?
Like, how could we sort of breed a version of humanity or engineer a version of humanity that would actually be nice to us? Yeah. And that's a little bit like the challenge we're confronting, except there are a lot of differences, of course. Like, so the more promising approach, well, there are several, but like one promising approach to explore is the idea of using the AI's own intelligence to learn about human values. So that rather than we doing all the cognitive work in advance, you would try to create an AI that, by observing human behavior, maybe interacting or asking human questions, it could learn about what it is that we value. And if it's super intelligent, a super good learner, it would be very good at learning what we value. And then the second component is that it would then also have to be designed in such a way that it cares about what it learns that we value. So it's one thing to learn that you want X, but if I don't care about what you want, the disaster might still be outcome. So you would have to engineer its motivation system such that it would be motivated at any given point in time to choose its actions based on its evolving guesses about what it is that we want, something like that. And that's one of the avenues that is being. I could foresee that AIs will already observe humans to serve up better search results. You observe what results people click on and so on.
Yeah.
So this is really where the debate is now. It's not about, is it going to happen? It's the question of, if we create this super intelligent AI, regardless of whether we attribute consciousness to it or not even, it's the question of it having godlike power and godlike cognition. So it's pretty crazy when we think about this in terms of building an idol, whereas in the Old Testament, it's always talking about, building it with craftsmen with their hammers and tools and building it out of stone and wood and gold and silver. And now we're looking at something far more complex and far more, just far beyond what or just what is the teaching that is embedded in this whole concept of creating an AI, and then not just the technical questions that come with, like, is it going to achieve true sentience and true consciousness, or, will it spawn a whole race of little AIs, or, will there be good ones and bad ones and all these things. But the question of how do you teach it morality? How do you teach it to embody human values, quote unquote, right? Which is really the most ironic part of it to me. Because indeed, what are human values? What do human beings today regard as the basis for understanding what is right and what is wrong? And it's so crazy to think back in all those thousands of years where God is basically mocking the surrounding nations and Israel for following in their path and building these deaf, mute, dumb idols that can't do anything. And now finally allowing humanity to get to the place where they can finally build an idol that just overshadows anything that has come before it, in terms of how it actually embodies the essence of the mystery school teachings, in terms of the collective good of humanity, the collective higher values, right? Being concentrated, and how do we distill that from the populace and create some sort of super being, some sort of concentrated representation of all of our best attributes and aspirations and longings and endeavors. It's like it's the ultimate idol. Because as Elon Musk and Bostrom are talking about, we're actually programming it, even without intentionally doing so, by everything that we do now as we interact with technology. Everything we do on social media, everything we just do in the world that's being tracked and categorized and cross-referenced and put into algorithms. In our jobs, the way we shop, everything we do that interacts with a digital medium in any way, shape, or form becomes part of a database that in turn becomes part of this information base that is ultimately going to feed into this AI singularity monstrosity. So it absolutely will be regarded as this amalgamation of ourselves, an idol not built out of wood or stone or metal, but built out of our own thought processes and our own behaviors and beliefs and questions. And, is that going to be good or bad? And, a lot of people talk about AI and how it's scary on so many levels, but you don't hear a lot of people talking about how the scariest scenario is really this idea that AI could serve as this catalyst to actually convince humanity that overall we really are inherently good, and that this AI will somehow validate that, a very basic New Age belief in the goodness of humanity, and which of course is completely contrary to what the Bible teaches. And you think about it in light of so much of the history in the Old Testament and the New Testament and Israel, and how many times God chastises his people by giving them what they want, whether it's a human king or military and economic prosperity, as an earthly nation and all these things, giving them what they want in order to show like the futility and how that's just never going to turn out the way that people think it's going to be. So it's crazy when we just look at AI as the sort of initiation tool, right? As a concept, as a practice, the more and more we engage with it, the more accustomed to it, the more we all understand how Google uses all of our questions and all of our choices on what we click on and everything else we do online. And this is all feeding algorithms and feeding data sets. And everyone at this point knows that we're all programming AI on multiple levels. And not a lot of people are even really disturbed by that anymore. But what people mainly do get disturbed by is the idea that if this AI does reach godlike cognitive abilities, true general intelligence, that it will not represent our true inherent human goodness and, not turn out to be the God of our own, and turn out to not be the God that we would prefer, right? But the idea is that we can play a role in that. It's possible that it could be good or bad. It could be evil or benevolent. And so, this ties right into the whole, so many things that are taught in theosophy and the externalization of the hierarchy and how this great work, this great occult plan to raise the level of consciousness of all of humanity to a certain level, and that there will be some people who are just not with the program, and that basically they have to be purged and they have to be removed in order for this quantum leap in consciousness to occur. And if we collectively as humanity are programming this AI, and this AI is just a manifestation of whatever inputs we're giving it, garbage in, garbage out. Remember that I always used to say that about computers back in like the early days. But the garbage in people, the people that are, on the lower frequencies, are still believing in all this superstitious religious propaganda about sin and the need for forgiveness and all that. That's going to be like regarded as malicious code, right? Malicious programming, toxic data for the AI god, and all these things work in concert. Because as Musk is saying, for those who want to, you can merge with the AI and have unlimited cognition capabilities yourself. And so, this is the crazy part that obviously they weren't conceiving of back in 1980 and for a long time. Even if they were conceiving of like a temple in Jerusalem. And whether they rebuild the third temple, I'm not saying either way. I don't know, but I definitely don't think you can argue very satisfactorily that that's the end-all be-all of what that's about. There might be. Maybe they'll rebuild the temple and, stick a big quantum computer in the Holy of Holies. Who knows? And that would be like the Ark of the Covenant, where God's presence, the false God, the Antichrist's presence emanates from. Who knows? But it's this whole concept of symbiosis, where we build this idol, we build this God, both in the hardware and the software, over generations and over all this progression of technology and so-called science and everything. We create this own God, and then we program this whole God, and then the God can turn around and speak back and teach us and merge with us and usher us into godhood with it, which is absolutely 100% in lockstep with the ancient, occult dream of apotheosis, of embracing our own divinity, using these means of self-guided evolution, quote unquote, to bring that about. This is happening. These are real. The billionaires and the business magnates and the directors of these Future of Humanity institutes and so many of these other prophets of scientism, they're all pointing to this one way or another. Even while they seem to debate minor points, there's an underlying consensus that has to do with the assumptions about, well, if we get this right, if we do this right, if we're able to guide the evolution of AI in the right way so that it reflects our inherently solid human values, that's the lie that it's all built on, that we even have solid human values in the first place, that we even have a solid grasp of right and wrong and good and evil and morality. Because aside from the truth of God's word and the gospel, no one does. It's all subjective and it's all illusory. So in the end, it comes back to the gospel. It's not about fighting technology, because a lot of what Elon Musk says is true in the sense of that it's, whether you like it or not, or whether you're for it or against it, this is happening and they keep charging forward, and there is a sense of fatality or inevitability to it. And I think we underestimate just the depth of the seduction and the depth of the deception when we think about, will people who call themselves Christians eventually buy into this idea in droves? And is it just because they're numb to the origins of technology and scientism and all that, and don't understand conspiracies, don't understand the New World Order agenda and who's behind all this stuff? I mean, that's a huge part of it. But at the same time, how many people who would call themselves Christians, they're most vulnerable because they buy into this idea of, the collective human good. Deep down, they're actually buying into these New Age lies that have crept into so many of these apostate churches and pulpits. Because that's really the lie that it's all founded upon, that we actually could be a guide, that we actually even know right from wrong. Because all you have to do is look around and see the state of society. Even secular people who don't believe in the Bible see the downward spiral and lament it, but then still don't see that it's because we've departed from God and his righteous law and become a law unto ourselves. Do what thou wilt, right? Shall be the whole of the law. And this digital idol, the penultimate cybernetic collective, will be the epitome of that, as God gives humanity what it wants in order to show the futility and just the ridiculousness of building your own God, trying to be your own God. There's only one true God, and we are not him. And he has foretold the end from the beginning. No AI can do that. No computer program can prophesy the way God does. No piece of hardware or software can ever fathom the mysteries that the Almighty God can. And no amount of collective human ingenuity and engineering and collaborative effort will ever produce a means of achieving the utopia that people somehow just intuitively know we're still longing for. That heaven on earth that's just ingrained in us, that things are not right the way they are, but we can fix it, we can get better. If only, we find the right system and the right guide, the right oversight, the right precautions, the right parameters, the right technology, the right use of that technology. We just got to program the system right to create our own kingdom of heaven on earth, where we all worship our false god as we worship ourselves as false gods. And what a nightmare. So the point is not to wring our hands and scream about how the sky is falling and how scary and horrible all this. The point in talking about this, hopefully, is that people see that this is opportunity to share the gospel with people, to point these things out to them and show them that this is prophecy being fulfilled. This is all based on the lies of the fallen one. It's all about the divinity of man, which is a lie. So we should be encouraged by these things and be trying to share them with people, not scare them, but to share the truth with them and share God's love with them, and hopefully wake them from their sleep and help them find Jesus for themselves. So that's what I got. Thanks for watching.